Ryan.
Here.
Mr. Corey.
Here.
Mr. Tony.
Here.
Mr. Travis.
Here.
Mr. Polito.
Here.
Mona here. Mr. Kisco.
Here.
Mr. Knight is excused. Mr. Putnam.
Here.
Mayor Carbona, representative. Do you want me to do the, or just
Special
Mr.
meeting.
Petroselli and Mr. Pagola?
Here.
Oh, hey, Scott.
Okay.
And Mr. Wilson.
And Mr. Wilson, of course.
And Ms. Beans is on the.
Yeah, he's here remotely.
Here.
Great. So we'll do the building project updates. So I'm gonna pass this right over to Sue, who's been dealing with all this on our part, mostly without my input.
That's all right.
No, so I didn't,
I'm just kind
sorry,
of, I'm
I should
catching up.
correct. I didn't mean that to be a snipe.
Yeah.
What I meant is,
Oh.
what I meant is I don't have the bandwidth to do it. Really, I don't have the bandwidth to do it, and Sue has really taken it on. So just pass it
Not
right
as
over
much
her.
as of our building committee people, and you guys have been doing an amazing job. But we recently have discovered that we're at a point in the project where curriculum and building is starting to come together. And decisions are starting to be made in certain spaces of curriculum. So we want to make sure that the board is up to speed and I don't want to say more involved, but involved in what's happening weekly and monthly with the building committee meetings and the project overall. So I had a conversation with Dan Hutzler, the project manager, and there is, actually, Gary and I had a meeting with Mario and Ed and Fiona as well last week. And it came up that they have a system in place that tracks, that just ONG looks at, that tracks all the change controls. It's a Connex. And so we asked for access to that so that a couple board members could have access. And Dean, do you have access to that? No? All right. And I had asked for some representation from the board and central office because you'll be able to monitor the change controls that are going on and not necessarily, he just told me today, Dan said, none of the FF&E package information is in there. That's the SLAM contact, which that site has been down for many months. You used to be able to go there and get live updates and be able to look at the packages they were presenting. And that's where we were able to identify things that we wanted to address. And that's just not there anymore. So we have to talk more with SLAM about getting that back up and running. But in the meantime, we'll have access, a couple people, probably Glenn, Gary, and Dean, to the ACONX, so that we can monitor that closely. And then we also have to get back to that SLAM link so that we're live there.
We can print things off and bring them to the meeting if we want to.
Right.
That would be great.
So
Yeah, because you don't see
Or
things
forward
until,
them, yeah.
yeah, you need to be able to see them in advance so that you're not getting it at the meeting and then having to make a decision. I think that will just be easier for the board, and we'll be able to identify curriculum versus build, which is very important right now too.
Mhm.
Just keep a close eye on that.
Yeah, my understanding is that the primary driver is that now they're at the point where they're ordering equipment and things like that to go in the
pathway
building,
rooms and-
right, in
yep.
the pathway rooms, and we want to make sure that that aligns with what we actually intend to teach the students. Is that?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And I think Dean's been doing site visits and meeting with the teachers on the existing shops and identifying what it is that we need. I believe and this is where, curriculum, it's tools, but it's still curriculum for the auto shop and for construction. We need to identify now what is it we need, and I think you made a list. And because we won't have the money and capital to ever get that in the future. We know that will never happen. So we just have to be diligent and make sure that we're all on the same page and working closely. Go ahead,
So
Gary.
one of the things that we talked about, maybe he told you, was setting aside 150 to 200,000 for the auto and construction tech. I mean, construction tech is probably gonna be 50 grand, excluding the upgrades, to what we talked about to improve the space itself. But we don't know what auto is gonna be. So
That was the numbers. I mean, I couldn't tell you either.
yeah, exactly.
Right,
That's what I
that's
said to
one
him.
of the things
Even
we're
Dean
waiting for from SLAM. The request went in weeks ago for a list of what we need and how much. And well, now we know what it is, but how much is it? Put it out to bid, please. And
And one other thing, just so everybody knows, I mean, some people on the board, they're attending the meetings that aren't on the committee, but Jeff, anyone?
Jeff, yeah, I know.
Is
Jeff-
very
yeah.
concerned. Well, I'm as much concerned that SLAM is, getting away with a lot, but in the end, we're gonna have about $1 million on. By the end of the end of the process, and we're gonna fight.
Mhm.
You know, you can't do it now, pencils will be down, and project will come to a grinding
Yeah, as
halt.
much as I'd like to.
That's the way construction goes.
We've been held back.
ONG is doing a great job, can't fault them.
No, they are,
Um,
and they're right on top of it
Yeah, no, I haven't heard a single person express an issue with
in
ONG.
the management of the project, yeah. It was remarkable on the tour that on Saturday, Dan, actually, I haven't done a tour with him, Dan Hetzler, and he's the lead there, and he literally knows every nut and bolt in that building, what it's for, what it's doing. I mean, it's mind blowing. He knows everything. The things he was pointing out to us were incredible. So yeah, we just wanted, like I said, wanted to get everybody on the same page. There's also Scott, Ed Aram told me that in your office, there's a binder
Oh, yeah.
that we can reference if we needed to, that you can look at where it says, where the things that they're ordering, he has like a cross-reference of some
He told you where to look
sort.
to, it's in
I
there.
believe him.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
There's a
All
part
right,
of,
so
there's a part of my office that
that's
has a
dedicated to that.
force field
Okay,
around
so
it that
there
we
is,
can't go to.
It's got change orders and all the
yeah,
purchase
all the
orders in
change
there.
orders. I actually have them. I have a copy of them downstairs. I'll have to grab it.
Everything
left
would
it in
be
the
on
car.
that
Yeah,
desk.
okay.
Yep, so there
in
is,
that corner.
yeah, if you guys, if you wanted to take a look at some point, obviously check with Michael or Dean on availability of it, but, you know, it's there if anybody has questions or wants to see what's being ordered.
Does it list out what construction technology is getting? It's been a hot button topic at the building committee for a
Mhm.
long time, and woodworking equipment is cool and all, but it's not really the spirit of construction technology.
yeah.
There's panel sets and things for roofing and electrical and plumbing. They're not, full blown setups, but there are educational tools to diversify that program to what it should be versus what I've seen so far. And I haven't
Mhm.
seen the FF&E for it because I don't think it actually, until now, may not have existed.
Until now is the
Yeah,
key.
And that is the key word, Jeff,
Mhm.
because Dean, I'll give credit to Dean, since he's been involved, really went in and with Gary, had some meetings and really kind of came up with the design that everyone was happy with from a building committee / educationally moving forward opportunity, increasing the electrical load to 3 bus bars. That was Dean's idea, just making the space more user-friendly, more open for any change that comes down the line. But in terms of equipment, Dean's list did get onto the FF&E, so it is very, very recent, but at least that equipment has been vetted and known to be useful for the projects moving forward.
And there are things like there's education centerpieces that slide back and forth on panels I've seen in other schools that are electrical or the various skills you need. Because construction technology isn't just, building the frame of the
A lot of the
building.
walls will be stored. Let me just say, I forgot to ask them about the pad for the Connex boxes. Did you ever remember to ask them? I know you did.
For
think
the
you had
outdoor
to-
storage?
Yeah.
So there was no pad that was gonna go into the sugar shack. So, just found that out the other day, but I
What were
did,
they gonna put it on?
just
the
stone,
ground?
like it's done now.
Oh,
Just some process or some stone down for a base so it stays moving.
oh, okay.
For what I envision or have an idea what those areas are used for, it's
Stone's
fine.
good.
Okay.
I mean, it's fine.
It'll
As
work.
long as they box it out and they bring it
So
home.
as long as they give us, and it'll probably help us as far as the amount of footprint when it's not concrete, when it's just stone, where you can
Yeah.
kind of move around a little bit. So I just went out there today because and I didn't even talk to the boss about it yet, but just to see like when would be the soonest we can place something there.
Okay.
And
We talked about 2 Connex boxes, right?
not Connex, we're talking about possibly, we did talk about
Shed?
that, Mike.
We did get
Yeah, some sort of
nicer.
like a shed.
Nicer
Instead
than
of
a
a
Connex
Connex
box.
because we
box.
wanted
Nice.
it to look
The ability
appropriate,
to handle
especially
it.
with the color scheme.
Yeah.
So those boxes were intended to store all the movable partitions or the walls as they're built. They had the stuff being stored inside, the lumber being stored inside. It's gonna be outside.
I'm talking about the pieces,
I know what you're talking-
the actual educational pieces, the
Correct.
wall you're gonna build and put it all in and make it a setup for students to learn on, but those things that are inside it aren't $400 pieces of equipment.
They're gonna have to define what the total curriculum's gonna be. And hopefully we have enough money for it. Well, we're gonna have enough.
Yeah,
The furniture came in 400,000 less so far. So they wanna hold us
So
at
they're
150.
setting
I think it's
aside
For the whole
200.
200
No, for the FF&E.
for the FF&E.
Just
Just the purchase.
Just the furniture.
Package itself,
Yes.
for the whole building.
So when Ed reported at the last meeting, to Gary's point,
Mhm.
it was to be as close to exact as possible, but there's still 542,000 remaining in the FF&E. So roughly 460,000 has been spent. So
Okay.
Gary's spot on with the number, but
Yeah.
so to that point, no, meaning the minus from, so that's where the
Yeah.
5 comes back. But yeah, so I think it's, I think having that money in the FF&E, then putting the list on that Dean helped create. Now the next big ticket, and Gary, you mentioned it because you were remote at that meeting, the next big ticket is going to be the automotive. So there are going to be some big ticket items coming, but knowing that there's some cushion in the FF&E, and I don't say cushion lightly, just the fact that they've done a great job to go out to bid to vendors they've used. And that's kudos to O&G and kudos to SLAM and kudos to Amanda at SLAM, who she's the one who handles FF&E. And she really shook some trees to get the people to come in to bid really responsibly. So that's the reason I feel that we're in a good spot moving forward with the construction lab and the automotive. But to your point 2 seconds ago, it's got to get on the list though,
Mhm.
because we can't,
And
and
the
so Sue's
automotive
point, we
is-
can't just leave it because
Yeah.
we're never going to see it.
Never gonna see it.
And the automotive, I think, made it to Amanda.
Yes.
The one thing that I did talk about the other day, Mara was probably listening. We talked about the engineering, and actually, maybe you can think about it. They talked about bringing everything over from whatever we have now, from the engineering group. I don't know if it's software, I don't know if it's computers. There wasn't an explanation, so I think we should reserve some, I said we should reserve the whole portion of the building because
Mm.
I don't think
We
we know
don't know
yet.
what we don't know yet,
Right.
and we don't know.
We got a
what's missing.
CNC,
Right.
we got a piece of CNC equipment, bringing one over, which is tabletop, and then we're gonna get a new one, which is gonna be floor mounted. But I don't know what goes along with that, so that'd be something we need to also think about. You're probably more educated on that than I am, so,
Look at it.
See what-
that's why I'm saying we need to get a little more than just the 150, maybe it's 200, 250.
I thought
But
we
they also,
ended up
whatever
with
it's gonna be, it's gonna be.
Ed saying 200.
Well,
but
Mario
I
wants to
don't
stick with
remember.
150 for now, they
Oh,
said,
okay.
so. We have,
But we, at least there's a cushion,
Right.
so we have money to be able to
Right.
get the things that we need.
We'll just tell Mario we're gonna shake his tree.
yeah, that's right, Mario.
But and just to be clear, so the stuff that I gave a list of the FF&E is stuff for more wall construction.
Correct.
And this and that. There's no modules.
No.
Like what you're
Right.
speaking about. There's nothing in there like an electrical module or some sort of, I think like Hampton makes them,
Yeah, a
Hampton
bunch
Bays.
of them.
That's not,
But that's, I mean, is that the direction of the board? The board says, I want to do a construction technology program.
That's where they have to
We,
step in.
we have to figure that out. As a board, we have to decide we want it to have, it doesn't, I mean, we have all these resources in the building to teach various things, but we don't actually teach this now, so we should look at other sources for what we should have.
Well, I think Sue Ferguson is looking into the different
Oh, good.
curriculum paths.
That's the curriculum
Yes.
component.
Right, there's
Yeah.
this
And
original
what needs to go in,
conversation.
what you-
Yes.
because we'll never
Yeah,
get to
they'll bring
Smart
it to
Life.
us.
No,
They'll
never.
do the research
No.
and the investigation on what
Never get it.
they're looking to do, yeah.
Unfunded state mandates we have to pay for, but unfunded building committee things never will happen.
You're right.
True.
Yeah.
Glenn,
Is a lot of the stuff we're talking about, since it's part of the building project, the 75% state reimbursement, whatever.
I think it's 85.
85%,
85%.
and
Maybe it's
yes,
3.5 or something. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, all the equipment is included in the package.
Yeah.
The only thing I think that was eligible for a lower reimbursement was the central office component.
and
on
no
the
reimbursement,
structure.
I think, on the permits.
Well, one of the things we did talk
Right.
about, which we decided to wait and see what the answers, the real facts might be, is the city is trying to impose an $81,000 sewer hookup fee.
86,000, I thought.
Or
it was.
86,000.
Yeah. It started at 300,000, now it's down to 86.
To get it right.
Figure
back
that
from the
out.
state.
But they're
Which is not eligible for
which is
reimbursement.
not
Right.
eligible.
But, and it
Thousand.
also converts into 400,000 or 600,000 in
400
project costs.
400.
It's not a dollar to dollar share. It's 86,000 the permit, but because it's not reimbursable, it actually 400-ish comes off our project budget, which is a huge hit. That's our furniture for these pathways.
The WPCA gave a volume of sewage. That's how they based their fees that they gave to us, I guess. Our engineer came up with another volume based on what it used to be before with the high school alone, added the number of students from middle school and came up with another volume. His estimate is much lower than the city's, I believe his estimate. We used to have 2,000 kids in that school. It's the same 10-inch sewer line
Right.
pumping out of that building
Mhm.
today as it was before. They just want to charge for more volume. So that, but we have to verify the volumes.
And they
because-
didn't take into consideration the gallons per flush and, none
Low-
of that
low
was in
flow.
that estimate that we saw.
Because they don't, it's not actually relevant to them. What's
Right.
relevant to them is that they can essentially tap the local taxpayer for bonded money on the city's credit card.
Yeah.
And then force the building committee to pay it so that they've got a little bump in the cash coming in whichever fiscal year it happens to arrive in. It's circular budgeting. It's just the same as our insurance.
So nothing's changed. We have a school today that's maybe pumping out the same sewage as 50 years ago. The line's not being replaced, but we'll see.
So we're.
We have to make sure we have the right information.
We had
Right.
2,200 capacity in the 70s, plus all the teachers.
Yeah.
That was just the
If
kids,
they're not bringing the
2,200.
sewer.
And less efficient water.
And less
Right, less
efficient.
efficient
there's no
water,
time.
yes.
Right.
Huh?
There's so many comments.
Can't even make it
So
up.
that's something else. At the time, we have to go through the numbers. Before we say our volume is down, we have to make sure that, I'm gonna have my engineer look at it too.
Yeah, so once you have that confirmed, then we'll have to go to the city and I think on behalf of the building committee to get that resolved.
Right.
Yeah, because they don't really have the authority to push back on that. We have to do it.
You
Is
need,
the
you need their
city-
sign off for the CO too. That's, the connection's there already. We ran it into the building and it's
Is the
just the CO.
city considering the whole middle school? Because it's only 7th and 8th that's coming. It's not the whole middle.
They did
school.
just look at those
They did.
numbers, because they did a breakdown of how many
Okay.
students per grade, how many teachers, how many central office staff. They did it by building.
Okay, okay.
And all
They
the
they need to
counts.
sign up for a CO, correct? WPCA?
Yeah,
Still,
you-
yeah.
well, you don't need a CO, no. So, well, your sewer line is existing sewer lines going in there.
Right.
So, yeah, yes, still need it for that. It's not, you're not remodeling. But anytime there's a change of use, not use now, a change of, I guess, anything over a certain dollar amount is when everybody starts sticking their finger in it. So you did.
To get a
major-
penny.
You did a major change, you need to upgrade, you need a major change, obviously new schools.
Mhm.
There's no line extension on the city's part. There's no, you
So we're
know,
taking the existing sewer line that goes into the old high school, we're bringing it into the new high school.
I suspect they put a new, new sanitary manhole in and then they're gonna tie into both of them, I would assume.
They'd have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to have both buildings at once for a little while.
Anyway, that's something else that's out
Yeah,
there.
so those are some of the high ticket items that we're waiting to get through. And that's why just keeping everybody on the same page at this point going forward, I think is important. Because there's gonna be a lot of decisions that'll have to be made.
Anything else? Good.
Do we know of anything that was not in the FF&E package that we're probably gonna need, whether it's in automotive or whatever, anywhere?
There's
Has
two
anything
old
been
buildings to talk
identified
about.
yet?
The two buildings.
Entire whole lot of them.
That's line item one.
Automotive line
Yeah.
two, construction.
Well, there are some things like we found out, to answer your question seriously, like, that's why Dean has went over just to see the condition of some of the tools that we're gonna put on the FF&E. But like one of the big ticket items was, there's 2 lifts in the new drawing, but only one was really going to be installed. So that was hesitated immediately and said, if it's drawn for 2, put 2 in.
Yeah.
And that just makes sense because, you
Right,
know,
why
you're never
take
gonna
away?
go back 5 years from
Yeah.
now and put another lift in.
Right.
You know, so that was a big ticket item that was found. I don't want to say little ticket items, but like, so for example, an air impact gun, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
like, while the one we have might be usable, that could be brought over. You know, we're looking at it, say, okay, this is one that was bought 10 years ago. Let's put a new one on the FF&E just because, and switching from the compressed air to the battery, you know, so there's things like that's the list that we're still unsure of. And in fairness to Dean, you know, he kind of stuck his head first on the construction, which we're appreciative of. And now he's been asked to kind of take a look at the automotive, not necessarily his wheelhouse, but he's working through it from a tools perspective, if that answers your question. We don't have any specifics just yet, but that's something that we are working on to make
So
sure
we
it
have
does
extra
get on.
time with automotive because that's not gonna be opening up when the rest of the high school comes up.
Correct.
It's an addition.
Well, just to note that FF&E won't cover portable hand tools. Most of the time,
Correct.
FF&E was only gonna cover
What
things can be,
stationary,
not, I don't wanna say bolted down,
but
but things that are permanent
Permanent to the structure.
to the structure, so
Okay.
they won't handle air gun or anything of that.
Okay.
The compressor maybe, but not the
Compressor,
air
Right.
they
gun.
will, yeah.
yeah,
Right.
but not
But the
those.
compressor we have there was a Perkins, it's like 2 years old, it's like brand new.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of
That
those
lift
things.
that's
that-
there.
The lift isn't that old either, and that might have been another Perkins one, now that I mentioned it, was some sort of grant. So, was it that? I could be wrong about that. There was a couple things in there that were funded that way that, but it's not that old and it gets inspected.
That's
So,
what I was gonna ask about.
yeah,
Is it,
I mean, listen, it's a lift, right? So if it's got all the safety devices on there, again, my personal, it's got all safety, it's been inspected and all that, so have to check on the year. I mean, maybe it's
that's what I
8 years
brought,
old.
I brought
10
that
years
up
old.
with Ed and Mario the other day, that just not off, we don't want it just an off the shelf system. We want something that meets all the safety requirements and that we understand. Slam should be doing that for us. They
Mhm.
haven't done it yet, but I told them they need to weigh in on it. They need to spec out what meets all the current educational requirements and safety requirements and present it to us. So,
And Donna Labby has been looking into grants for hand tools.
I just wrote that
Yeah,
on my
she's-
paper.
She's already,
Okay.
so there's a
Good.
grant that, I know, we all know Lowe's puts out a big one for hand tools. Donna has really infancy stages of kind of scratching the surface to see what it entails, what the need is, what the write-up would be.
Yeah,
But
great.
Mario and Ed, in fairness to them, reached out right after the last meeting saying, hey, if we can't cover it, can we cover it through other means? Donna's been working on it.
Great. Good.
I just have one last question. When you're referencing change orders before,
Mhm.
I don't know what's in their contract, but are there any limitations when it comes to change orders as far as percentage markup and profit?
That I don't know. I don't know if Gary
I don't
knows.
know either.
Usually that's all negotiated.
I was
in
gonna
the
say, they have
contract.
you-
It would be in the
You,
contract. They
I
just-
I can't imagine that.
That's what I
It's
want to
not.
know from Dan, but
They're flying by
I
that.
What about
I know there's
Donna?
unit prices and markups. I just don't know what it is.
Donna-
Everyone's different, but
Did Donna take a look at the contract? Do you know over the
I
weekend?
haven't talked to her. She
Okay.
already looked at it twice, so.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Donna Mediello could answer. She looked at it.
Maybe.
Michael, maybe you've looked at the contract. I don't know.
I have not
haven't
looked
seen
at the
it
contract for the
myself.
dollar amount. I certainly can.
Mhm.
But I
Just email
will
me.
say that having the two
Dan will respond
new
in 5
gentlemen
seconds.
that were introduced at the last building committee meeting, the two younger gentlemen that had referenced several times at the meeting, they have now brought the change orders up to date back from July. Was it, I don't want to misspeak. I think it was,
No, I think it was
you,
too.
Dean and I were chatting about.
July.
Yeah, there were some sitting around that they had to clean up. The July ones, they got themselves familiar with,
Mhm.
but then some of the ones were sitting on the shelf. I believe he said October, November-ish, but I don't want to misquote anyone. And those two gentlemen have now brought it up to the last week.
Oh,
Who would have been responsible for that?
Well, I think they had some turnover internally as well.
Well, who?
Slam, right?
I believe so.
It's Slam.
So these two
Yeah,
gentlemen,
it's
though, have
Slam.
really brought it up to speed. And we got all the changes that night. So I think moving forward, I can look for the percentage to your question, but in terms of changes that were made, it is now up to the minute. So those two young guys have been doing a great
I'm
job.
just saying, like,
Reach out to Dan.
change order approvals. I mean, someone's got to vet it.
That's
And
been
Well,
Dean's
that's the-
question.
that's the
Glenn, that's a
problem.
bad question.
So
Yeah.
there's B&L, right?
Yes.
BL companies are, from what I've gathered so
They're a
far,
third party.
are the third party
Yeah, I
that's
know.
They're the
supposed to be
owners,
looking at them before they come to the board, so the board can review them, right? But the questions should be asked through them, and I'm not saying he's doing it or not doing it. But I had the same question, because you're handing a bunch of change orders out to people that, again, need to be educated on what they're looking at.
Right.
And they're,
Right.
and they have to rely on somebody who's gonna be representing us.
Mhm.
And I believe it's the guy from BL.
Yeah. And I think,
Okay.
and Ed had referenced that at another
So is that,
meeting.
I'm sorry, before you
No,
go
no.
on, the two gentlemen, were they from BL or were they from Slam last
The
week?
two, I think, were from Slam, the two younger guys.
No, they're ONG guys.
No,
Were they
they're
ONG? I
ONG
don't,
guys.
they're
Oh,
ONG,
they were.
sorry.
Oh, okay.
I
So
apologize,
they-
ONG.
Yes.
So
they
they brought
brought
everything up to
people in
speed. I'm sorry.
To
yes.
look at the backlog of change orders at this
I
point.
think they just cleaned a lot of stuff up, and then
Okay.
that was changers, because they have these
Gotcha.
two guys,
Sorry
and
about that.
but they're
My
ONG,
fault, I
they're
apologize.
ONG employees
Yeah, okay.
that are
alright.
kind of putting things together,
Okay.
from what I
So
took
they've
out.
been on top.
So
of it.
they're picking up where BL,
I don't know.
we don't
No,
know.
what happens,
No.
No.
I don't think it's a
scope.
BL, I think BL's still
Yeah,
supposed to
I
review
think it's-
everything.
Yeah, it's worth asking the question definitively, who screwed up?
Well, it wasn't- I don't think it was, what happens is BL reviews everything every week. And a lot of things that come in, like change orders, they have to decide first, who's responsible? Is it a design mistake?
Yes.
Is it a subcontractor mistake? Is it the responsibility of ONG that it comes off their contingency? So the B&L reviews for that, at the beginning of our package, we get all these, I forget what they call it, is that first 7 or 8 pages that indicates what might be a change order, and whether or not that it's going to be a BL mistake or a ONG, possible ONG error, not error, but something they've got to pick up because they missed it in the bid,
Omitted from the bid, yeah.
or unresolved until they determine whose responsibility it is. It's usually 50-50. I mean, a lot of ONG has probably taken half against their contingency, and the other half have come to us. Typically, with the slam mistakes, if it's a slam mistake, we still have to fix it. So the change order might get approved, but it's one of those that are being maintained by B&L as not our fault, not ONG's fault,
Engineer design.
but engineer design.
Error.
And with that $1 million at the end, there's gonna be a fight. And you can't do it now. They're not talking now.
Yeah, like where the gym didn't meet the other gym. I'm like, oh,
Well, so maybe I just
That was
need
a
a
big
little
one.
clarity on what we're, so when you say, they found and dealt with these change orders that date back to July, does that mean that the change was already made and nobody's paid for it? Or what does it actually mean?
No, so
Sometimes.
the two gentlemen have got themselves apprised on all of the changes. And then there were ones, I guess, hanging out there that, that's the list, to Gary's point, that we get that says this change order is approved, and who did it come out of? So did it come out of ONG, or does it come to?
So
the building committee to vote
meaning
on.
those change orders went through the whole process, they were paid for, the work was done, but the building committee hadn't seen
I
them?
don't think so.
I don't understand what you're
No,
describing.
they don't get approved until the building committee approves. So the zeros out from ONG. still
So
get
if they're
the red
really
out.
old, hang on, I want this to be explained to me like I'm 5 years old. If
hope
they're
I
from
can.
July,
Yep.
The work was done.
yes,
The work was
Oh, it
done.
was done.
Now the
no,
negotiation.
no, how's it work done if it's?
It gets a little complicated, but no, sometimes you have to decide to do it. And sometimes they will do it. And ONG will set it aside as a possible ONG chargeback on their contingency.
Yes.
Some things can't hold up the job. So ONG makes the decision, can hold up the job or not hold the job. And they put it in a bucket. And that's why this B&O list, which goes on for pages, for instance, the kilns, $30,000 change order to buy a new kiln and extend the HVAC ductwork for 15 feet. And that was the total. It never got approved until the last meeting, but it sat there trying to figure out, number one, where could they put it? How could they get it there? And I don't know yet who's going to eat it, us or ONG or the architect. I think Mario said he told them that we need this third kiln where it's going, and maybe it's a curriculum thing. I think Mario said he thinks it's a curriculum thing.
Mhm.
So it was approved as our cost, but it sat out there because number one, the HVAC hasn't happened yet in the existing middle school building, and we haven't bought the kiln yet, but it is on the FF&E.
So change orders, submittals are given, they're reviewed, they're approved, the change order's ready to go, they just haven't cut the purchase order for that change order.
And that's
It's gone through the
ONG's
submittal
job.
and approval process. Okay.
The approval without knowing, I don't know how many of them, there's a lot of,
Yeah.
let's say 20% haven't been assigned to somebody yet.
Okay.
And they evaluate the risk, like the HVAC contractor. He's falling down all over the job. He's putting up ductwork with the grid up. So what's that doing? It's slowing him down. He's charging more, but he's tearing up the walls. He's tearing down the grid. You can't stop him. As you stop him, he shuts the job down. You could try to stop him, but the decision was made not to stop him. And we're going to approve change orders, like the fireproofing guys, two of the kids that came from here last year. They were patching walls and painting for 3 weeks. And they're keeping track of the total cost, and then they're going to back charge MJ Daly in this case. He seems to be one of the few subcontractors that's fallen down. I don't know if you know more than that, but
and that's the HVAC contract.
correct. HVAC plumbing.
So I see what you're saying. So what really is delayed since July is not the costing or the work, but just who eats the
There you
cost.
Yeah.
Which
Thank
still
you,
is a
Gary.
screw up.
No,
Which still is a screw
you're
up
not
because
wrong.
The building committee doesn't necessarily know how much money it's got left over because it doesn't know how much it's already paid. Because the work's already been done and the money's already come out of the account.
Well, if they've approved it,
think Ed
they
knows.
carry it in the. if it
You're right,
gets
they
approved-
carry it, but they don't know if it's real, right? If they're gonna recover it from somebody else.
True, but it comes off the total. They hold
Right.
it as a.
Right.
total.
Yeah, I'm not saying, sorry, I'm not saying the money's like disappeared in the ether. It's just, they don't know ultimately if it's gonna live on their balance sheet
Right.
or if ONG is gonna eat it or
How
whatever.
big the fight's going to be and how much you want to fight.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for,
No, it's okay, just.
No, I'm
it's-
glad.
It's good,
It's
so
good.
everybody's.
right, I wasn't
On the same
following
page.
what the actual problem
Yeah.
was with the change
But when
order.
you get the
I'll take that one. Gary bailed me out on that.
No,
Thank you,
no. Well,
Gary.
when you get the package, there's
I'll
there's
gladly
the whole
take that
section that B&O writes. just read through it. You'll see all the things that might be pending. They'll have no change, they'll have resolved, they'll have it moved on. They make notes to that. And then if they haven't been pushed forward, they come forward.
Yeah.
So,
No.
Oh, okay. Okay, are we good then on
I
the
think so. Does anybody have any
Building
other
project.
questions?
more to come?
Yeah. Stay
Um,
tuned.
okay, this one I think should be a little simpler, more direct. We have gifts, grants and bequests.
Mhm.
I know there's been some discussion over who is ultimately the deciding party, whether it's the Board of Education or the city.
We
So,
resolved that.
right, we
So,
sought a
yep.
legal opinion that was pretty definitive. That looked at the state law and the city charter and determined that the ultimate responsibility and authority rests with the Board of Education.
Mhm.
So that's where
So
I'm
there
at on
was,
this.
right, so then we had a policy meeting, the building committee is, needs an answer, needs guidelines and guidance from the Board of Ed on how to move forward with donations and gifts and grants and things like that. So we do have an email back from 2022, I asked Michael to bring it from Shipman that did some research back when, I think a committee came to the building committee or the Board of Ed to name a weight room after someone that had passed away, so we got a legal opinion. The legal advice was, do refrain from, don't do it. So you could read this at your leisure, that's basically what it says. Also in here, I think there was a consideration or suggestion about doing like a walkway, a brick walkway of if people wanted to donate. You know, we'd have to pick a number, I guess, or talk about it, but you know, people want to donate and they can have their family name, their name, whatever engraved in a walkway up to the building. And then leave it up to us to figure out how do we want to launch that. We have the ONGs there right now. We can ask them to build a path. And then as people make donations and want to have their name somewhere, we can do it on a stone or on a brick.
That'd be another change order.
Yeah,
Now, Glenn.
Although we
That's
could go,
easy,
listen,
easy.
there's all those
You know
bricks
what
at
it's
the
like when you
Torrington
go on
company
a
that are
lot
up
of
for grabs. They said as many bricks as you can carry, you can have at the Torrington company.
My only question
So-
to
What about
with
the
the,
wood over there?
Yeah, I would imagine the same thing.
Sorry.
Everything's up for grabs. Yeah.
my question with the brick thing, our current policy says it's not anything that can incur future costs to the district.
Mhm,
Right? If we put in this brick walkway, there's gonna be costs associated to put it in and maintain it.
mhm. That's the current policy. So let's talk about what we want to be in the future. So that would
Okay.
be something to think about. We have to land on first, for the purposes of the building committee, the new building, what can we give them for all these requests that are coming in of people that want their name somewhere? So we've had, let me finish one more thought and then we'll open up the floor. So far, we've had a bench that was, the class of 1974 wanted to donate a bench with the plaque on it that says donated from class of 1974. So that's been ordered, it's in the works, they're sending a check to central office to cover the cost of all of that. That's gonna come up again, and it's already, it was approved and agreed, and go ahead, let's do it. So there's other options that we could possibly think about if other people wanted to make a donation along those lines. That's something we could leave up to board discretion for every instance that comes in. I don't know if I'm tossing ideas out here now because there's a lot of requests coming in. Go ahead, Ellen.
Who approved the bench,
Mario.
the building committee?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah, so
the building
it's
committee.
not.
It's two
Yeah.
benches, two benches.
But
Two benches.
we've also had benches previous to this.
I
Like
don't
in the
know.
courtyard, there were benches with.
Were they
names on it.
dedicated? Benches? I don't know the
Too old
answer to that.
remember.
Someone in our policy meeting at the last policy mentioned, remember Sean Collins?
Right.
Yes.
She had a bench in
She
the
had-
courtyard.
She
had-
did?
Oh, it was
Yeah,
you,
and
actually, it was you that
a
mentioned it, right?
cement bench, yeah, and it said
Okay.
in memory of Sean Collins. I
Yes.
don't know where it is.
Oh, it's not there.
I
anymore.
think they're all moved to, somebody said they were
It's not
moved to
there.
storage, not
Okay.
there.
I believe it was moved to storage, but that
Yeah.
really should be.
Maybe they
something
should see if
that's-
her family wants it. We'll just find out what was left there and see if anybody.
What
any
about
family
a
members
tree?
want it.
Though? I remember there was a tree planted right in the front of the school in memory of.
I don't think there's anything left in the front of the
Was Liz
school.
Deek, wasn't it?
Oh, Liz, yeah.
I think the conversation around any tree that was donated in memory was that there will be new trees planted and then the plaque would be moved to still
To
honor
there.
that person.
Not the same tree.
Correct, because to
It's
re-dig up
it's
the
wildly
tree.
expensive.
Yeah.
Oh, I know.
Yeah, I
it's
can
gonna
move
be-
So it was,
Yeah.
it was to
Yeah.
honor the memory,
Yeah.
but there was no way to
Oh,
dig the
lesson
tree up,
learned.
is where I believe they landed on that.
Go ahead, Jeff.
So we talked about this a bit on our meeting last week. I think the board has to decide, what do you want the building to look like?
Right.
Do you
you
want a
want it to be
building full
trash?
of, you know, sponsored by or donated by or provided by? I mean, it will eventually.
I like
it
what
could
I don't
be
think we
down-
do. No, I don't think that's what we want. And that's why I think we need to come up with, you know, that's why if the bench was donated, approved, donated in the works. I don't want to say it binds us to figure out a going forward policy or procedure. But to some
Well,
extent, we have to
Whatever.
we have to
Think about
consider
this.
that, right?
I mean, I have like
If we-
two considerations generally would be, one, I would never want to like accept money, right?
Right.
So like if you want to put a bench somewhere on the grounds, I don't want to take your money and buy the bench. I want you to buy it and put it in. And the other thing would be, I think Jeff's point, like my preference would be to set a limit somehow, or to give the superintendent the ability to set a limit, either geographic or numerical, or something, right? Some, you know, nothing goes in a classroom, right?
Mhm.
Nothing goes in this space or that space. There's only so many benches to be put outside, only so many trees in the courtyard. Because I think we want to accept, you know, if an alumni association or a class of X year wants to do that, I think we, you know, they're valued parts of the school community, and we want to at least be able to give that consideration. But I think that to the point that we just raised, we should limit it somehow in a way that isn't discriminating, but just maybe gives a first come, first served sort of deal. But you know, it won't, I think after an initial flurry of people who want to put something, you know, physical on the new school, I don't think we're going to deal with this very much for the next 30 years after that.
But Marissa sent the packet she sent around last week for policy. There were some examples
Yeah.
in there. I think everybody should look at that, because
Mhm.
each school has a different approach to how they want to approach things. And some are indeed very detailed, make a lot of sense when you read it, but then you have to decide, is all of
Well,
that worth it?
Think about the mess we got in with facilities. I don't want to say the mess, but that policy was there were so many different options, issues and things we tried to capture and identify. You can't capture every situation. So for us to try to do that now, I just think we're just gonna be chasing our tails, and we don't have time for that.
Do you really need, do you want plaques in the building, or do you want to just have a?
No.
Do you want, do you want to just roll
I
to,
don't know anybody
it's a
else.
walkway, or I think it's at Disney and other places do the big walls, you know.
Yeah,
description
brick on a
walls,
walkway.
Brick on a walkway that you can then honor, and then you can decide, yes, this is great. We're not giving you a huge plaque. You don't get a bigger brick than anybody else. Thank you for supporting the Torrington Public Schools. We appreciate it, and your longstanding commitment to our community. Here's your brick that's the same as, you know,
Everybody
somebody
else.
else. And you can, depending on what you accept for donations, you can hold a reserve. I saw one of the districts does it. They hold a reserve of the donation to maintain it.
Oh, okay, to
So-
Glenn's point, if we have to maintain it.
If something happens, because you eventually, you also have to think about what if something, you put somebody's name up somewhere, or you do something, and then you have to remove them, which we have seen in culture lately.
Well,
Mhm.
and that's
Yeah.
actually, but that's
It's not
covered,
cheap.
that's covered in one of the, I think it was Tucson that covers it. One of the schools, one of the school districts covers those kinds of things. And the person you might be naming, or the individual you're naming, has to have a certain, I want to say CV, or, resume, or, worldwide,
Can't be a convicted
exceptional.
felon.
Well, this is more
Make it
what
simple.
what they've been able to accomplish in their life. Was it a lifelong career, and are they contributing to the school, or are they?
But those are things we should look at on an individual basis. if
Correct,
something
but
comes- I don't know
those
that we
need to
should-
be, included in the policies, I'm saying.
Well, and it
There's
would
so many
be-
different ways
it
to
could
look
be
at it.
administrative, right? We could delegate it strictly to the superintendent, whoever it may be for the future. And now we could establish a small committee, and that way, right, it's not something that is set in stone and it's 50 pages because we're
Mhm.
trying to account for every bad thing someone might have done that
Yeah.
precludes them.
Right.
I think in this case, less is more, simple is better, right? If we're going to accept this, we should do it, if it's gonna be donation based, it should be in partnership with the THS Alumni Association, and that's it. That's who you gotta give the money to if you want a brick on the walkway, or something
There you
like
go,
that,
yeah.
Very,
Easy
like,
peasy.
simple and direct. Give somebody the ability to say no, somebody the board trusts, again, the superintendent, a committee, it doesn't matter.
Usually less than the superintendent.
Right, and
Most-
then
most
just
schools.
leave it until it
Does it?
becomes an issue for somebody
That we
30
read
years
so
from
far.
now.
A couple of them were boards.
Couple of boards.
Some of them were changed from superintendent to board because the superintendent in some of those districts said, I don't want this responsibility. So, I mean, because your board tends to have some people who've been around for a very long time, they can help with that organizational history that,
Yeah, we could
sometimes you
partner
don't have.
together to do it, even, yeah.
No, there is, no.
In reference to a reserve, we can't hold money.
But the alumni.
Right,
can,
but if it
right?
were done in partnership with a community-based organization that's a 501c3, and all of that, but that we'd have
How
to
did
seek
you-
additional
was it a
legal
school
advice on.
district?
Yeah, I can find it. I don't have it with me,
Uh.
but I can find it. It was like 1.5% of any donation was held in a capital fund to.
For maintenance of
for
the
any-
sidewalk
yeah,
or
any
walk,
repair.
whatever we did.
Yep,
So
and they
we
figured
can
it
do
was like a
that,
20.
right, because we do it for the turf field.
Oh,
Yep, that's
There you
what
go.
it was. It was 1.5%, but it required you to either make the donation plus 1.5% of its value, or give the money, and then they were holding
did
1.5%. Some of these policies don't let you decide exactly what it is you're going to buy.
Oh, I don't want that, no.
So,
Yeah.
well, sometimes they don't let you. I'm saying, some of them say, if somebody says, I want to donate this equipment, and it has to be this brand, it has to have my
yes,
plaque.
see, I
this
think that's
thing."
what we want to avoid.
Yeah, that's
most
what
of
I'm
them
saying.
Yeah, we don't
They're
want
saying
that.
they don't. Some of them actually go so far as to say the donor must just settle on a dollar amount.
Yes,
And we would like to hear what they'd like to do, but if they want to support us, they want to support us. So there's a lot of different, as you and I
well,
both
that's a
looked at.
problem. There's a lot of different
Donate without
nuances there.
naming.
Well, our attorney gives us
Which
the
we can
opportunity to sit
now.
down and talk with them. In this email,
Mhm.
she suggests we do. I think we should.
This
Have-
was a
have a
couple years
meeting.
ago.
Talk with
Oh, it was a couple of years ago?
This was
Yeah.
from May 2nd, 2022.
Oh, I saw May 2nd. I thought-
Yeah, no, 2022.
Just the
This
timing
has
of
been good- Talked about.
Sue Ferguson saves
It
everything.
wasn't immediate
Yeah.
or relevant at the time, but we
Right.
did get a more recent opinion from the board's
Yes, we did.
attorney.
That's all it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah,
The one thing that I will bring up, I know that, I don't know who these people are, I just get the word from Mario and Ed. There are some people who want to, maybe, for instance, maybe name the theater after that, or a field. All I'm saying is, that has to be decided.
see, if you want.
I'm not
Right,
saying
my
I'm in favor or
take
against.
is actually in line with this. If
'Cause
you
we did it with
want us to
Frost.
name something important like that, you're not like giving a physical item that's small, that should go before a committee.
Oh, I
Because
agree with you
if the
there. No,
board
that's
says,
That's absolute.
right, if the board is saying, we
Yeah.
would like to name the theater something other than the THS theater, that's good, but we should establish a committee for that.
And there should, policy should state that.
So what about kind of handling it both ways? Setting up a program for like brick walkway
Mhm.
with a set donation amount, with a set amount, whether it's 1.5% or whatever it might be, set aside. But then have a committee with a policy separate for additional requests.
Donations or
Yes.
requests or.
And, have a policy written for that committee so that kind of outlines, certain things are not allowed, certain things are allowed, or whatever it might be, but it's at the discretion of that committee.
Could we even make it a policy that's a one paragraph that there's a subcommittee of the Board of Education that includes the superintendent, his designees, that looks at all requests and just makes decisions accordingly? It's
So
just
that-
very brief.
But then you're not treating everybody equal.
The type of requests have to be spelled out too. I mean, then it leaves it open.
Well, I
to-
know, but
Well, it's
I
different, a
don't know.
request
I
is
don't
different than
know.
why
like,
does it say, where does it say?
there's two
Yeah.
different categories of things. Because a request
I
to
agree.
name the theater, to name the weight room, to name the school itself,
Mhm.
that is a request of the board. There, someone is essentially saying, how much money is it gonna take to name this school after my grandpa? Whereas,
38.4
But the
million.
threshold should be-
Right, whereas-
Yes.
I'll go with your
whereas
number, Jeff.
someone
Give us some
saying,
consideration.
someone saying, I wanna contribute a relatively small or.
$500
cheap,
or $200.
right, physical item to leave my mark on this building project because I think it's really exciting and I'm passionate about it. That's a separate category of thing, right? Because that person wants to give a physical item that they wish to have be memorialized on site. And that's different. So I think we're talking about covering essentially two different types of contribution. You know, because
And that could be spelled out in the policy.
right, and I think
Which one of them does?
it should, but I
For
think
an
what
example.
Sue wanted to put this on the agenda for tonight for was just to solicit some preliminary input
Yeah.
so that when you take it to the policy committee, you know, again,
And again.
there's some additional
Just
input
one
and
more time.
context.
Okay.
No, but
I think we talked
it's
about
good
it ad
direction.
nauseam last time.
We didn't get anywhere.
No,
If
Some
there,
people want plaques in the, because we are hanging around, are we gonna allow plaques in the building? Are we gonna do a walkway? It might be helpful for the committee to know what direction is the board thinking they wanna go in? Like, do you want stuff in the building or don't you? Because as soon as you say, well, it depends, you make a framework of policy that's a nightmare. Like, does the board want things in the building or don't they?
Kristen?
so this is something that I said at the meeting last week is, it seems as though many people might not agree with me, and that's okay, I'm used to it. But
Trying to drop.
it seems as though we're heading in a direction where we don't want a lot of plaques and things and names everywhere and rooms named and places named and all that stuff. But I also think that we need to be cognizant of people who want to give us things that would be really beneficial to the school that maybe we can't afford. So we don't want to turn down something that's going to enrich the children of Torrington
right, just
in
because
any
it's
way.
not part of the policy, part of the
Exactly.
policy, right,
And
yeah.
and that is a middle. a
And
middle
and I
space.
don't want to see plaques and stuff everywhere either, but if, I don't know, somebody wants to donate like gym equipment or, some stuff for the drama department because they were a part of that and it could enrich our kids, I don't know why we would turn that down.
Right, I don't think we
Well,
would turn it
now-
down, but then
Yeah.
what do we do? The question
Right.
comes, what do we do? Like, so
Maybe
in
they get a free
exchange
brick,
for-
I don't
Well,
know.
Well,
that's
that,
what-
right,
You
the
know?
free brick, right,
Right,
as
you-
opposed
Instead of,
to
yes,
the theater being named after
Right.
that. You know,
Right.
like those are that's the
Yes.
extent of where we're talking, when
Yeah.
people are at that end of the spectrum.
the
But
issue
a
in
free
front of
brick
the
is a good
committee-
idea.
Yeah, the issue for the committee is whether they get something.
I think that we also need to be careful of things becoming public. Well, I offered Torrington Public Schools this great donation and they turned it down. How do they not want this for our children?
Right.
We need to be careful of that too.
Yeah.
But they also, I mean, yeah, we run into that kind of thing all the time. That's
That would be
really,
unavoidable.
yeah.
Right, but
unfortunately.
we also have to avoid being transactional. That's the key. I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Glenn, I should
No, that's
follow
okay.
first.
No, so with that said, is this not the correct form to say what exactly we're referring to when the building committee has requests? So we can have an understanding of what the order of magnitude is here. 'Cause we're talking about from benches to libraries, like
buildings.
what exactly are we referring to?
Well, the problem is it could be anything. I know there are people talking about naming the,
No, I'm not saying it could be anything, but it seems like there's some specific items that have presented to other people that we're not aware of.
No, just the bench.
this
And
one.
2 years ago, I think, was this the weight room 2 years ago?
it was.
Marianne
Yeah,
said
so
they were approached
those
again
are the only
about
two
this.
things.
Marianne
But
said they were approached again.
So there's-
about this.
Yeah, they were actually.
Yeah, that's what they
This
said.
did come up again.
Among other, they said there's also a bunch of people who Marianne had said have inquired without specifics because
Right,
we don't have a policy. There's no.
yeah,
Is
so,
the gym, is the gym equipment on the FF&E package?
I
It's not
believe,
reimbursable. I think that's not the issue there.
I believe so. but
I don't know.
I'm not 100%
I don't
See,
know.
my preference for stuff like this, and this might be a little bit granular, but for something like naming a room, I really would want to avoid honestly accepting any kind of donation or contribution related to it. But rather, if somebody offers, right, and says, I think you should name your weight room or your gymnasium after this person, that's when we would convene a committee
mhm,
of people, because now somebody's saying you should name your gym.
mhm,
Well, okay, let's consider naming the gym.
mhm.
And certainly we would love to consider that name and we can put it down in policy. Honestly, the suggested one isn't bad, that they can offer no more than 5 names. And if the committee says, well, we really only think that this one person,
Mario
so
says he
connected to this.
purchased the weight equipment.
It was, it's part of the FF&E.
Sounds like it, yeah.
Right, but that's immaterial, I think,
No, I know,
if
just
we
like-
decide if we decide as a group that we don't want to accept anything for naming rights.
Mhm.
And
So
that
why
may
don't
be
we,
what straw
to your
poll
point,
is.
let's straw poll that. Can we do that? And then we can go and this is the sample policy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Horrible.
right, okay, so let's consider whether we would name things and we can, because the straw poll, we're just soliciting input for Gary's use of that policy. We can
Mhm.
poll Bill separately and
Okay.
ask him his opinion, but if you,
Well, hold on a second, but think about, we have things that have been named already. What are we gonna do with those?
if they've been named already, well, I don't know,
The
that
Connie
seems like
Donahue
it's,
Gymnasium,
The gym has been named since
right,
early
63.
sixties.
that seems fine.
and then Doc McKenna was, I think, I'm not sure I'm asking the question. It was brought up,
Look,
the physical
the-
therapy room,
If the Board of Education before us made decisions to name
So
things,
then-
they should keep their name.
Frost is the football.
Yeah,
If
the
it,
football
if it
field.
still exists after this, right? I mean,
Yeah, they-
sometimes.
What they all
It-
do, and we're gonna have another
All
gym.
right.
Right, like,
All right,
I think that's, okay, let's rein it in, everybody.
all right, sorry.
So that's,
So-
that's gonna be an issue too, which just have to document it, that's all.
Right, that, and I think that's separate from the straw poll that I'm about to ask.
Yeah, so
which
let's do
is,
that, please.
if you think that, yes, the Board of Education should accept donations for consideration of naming rights. I think that's the straw poll we wanted, right? Or am I?
I was aiming for, do you want plaques in the building?
Right,
Or,
well,
you know,
right, let's tackle them all.
That's two different things.
So if you think the Board of Education should accept donations or so, otherwise receive anything to consider naming rights. Raise your hand if yes, you think that.
Naming rights?
As in,
But
should we
the-
accept $100,000 to name the weight room? Not saying that that's what the town offer.
Without
No.
consideration or discussion or
No.
review,
Right.
then
and-
no.
Right,
My answer.
No, I mean,
The answer
can I just
If
mention
it's-
one thing? If someone wants
was always
a
consideration.
room or
that's-
a portion of the building named after them, then they should be paying for a vast majority portion of the cost.
well,
of
and
that.
that's the straw poll. So then you would raise your hand, yes.
So if
I
you're
want
paying
that.
80% of the library that's
If
gonna be
you-
built,
So, okay, let me make this even
Go
clearer.
ahead, it's your name,
See, no,
exactly.
no,
I
Glenn,
heard the
Glenn
motion.
was talking to the superintendent instead of listening when we set
Oh,
down the
sorry.
straw poll.
Okay.
So here's what's at issue. It's not whether or not we would name things. It's whether we would name things after somebody in exchange for a big donation, or if we would merely consider it with no donation because we don't want to take money to name stuff.
Okay.
So option A is we'll take money to name stuff. Option B is we might name something after you, but you have to go through a committee process and we don't want anything for it.
No, I'd have to go with the first one then.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
How would we not take money for our students?
Let's just say somebody brings us $1 million. I don't know if they're going to, and I don't know if I
Because-
want to go
because
for it or not. If
Right.
they said.
So, okay, just raise your hand if you want to take money to name stuff. Because we're.
Yes.
Can we word it differently?
I'm
I'm not raising my hand to that.
Exactly,
I-
that's my
no.
point.
well,
So
But that's
I-
what it is.
It's.
no, it's.
Accept donations for the purpose of considering a building or a structure being named after
It's the same thing.
whoever.
Yeah, do you want to, do you want to
I
make
don't.
people buy
I mean,
into
it
the
sounds
naming
awful,
process
but-
or not?
You're selling a portion.
That's what you're doing. Yes.
It's almost like prostitution.
Yeah, it feels bad, doesn't it?
It does, it's awful. I don't like
No, let me
it.
explain why, other world circumstance. Let's say Henry Kissinger lives in Kent, Connecticut.
Not anymore.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay, fine.
right.
Fine, who else lives? Somebody who was great in the arts, somebody who's exceedingly successful. And Kate went to Torrington High School. I can't tell you there is anybody, but I know there are some people out there
Mhm.
who've won Emmys and Golden Globes and maybe even an Oscar, or what's his name, son? He was Casablanca. Who was the
Henry Bogart.
anyway, his son from Torrington.
Yeah.
He was involved he was a director, he was a producer. He's been in Torrington most of his life. He has a farm somewhere else. If he came forward and said, would you name the theater after my father, Henry Bogart, and I'll donate whatever, $1 million. I don't know that I would want to refuse that, given the, the
That's,
CV.
it's case by case.
my-
It's
my-
case by
it is
case.
case by
It's
consideration
case
would
by
be-
case instead.
We
Correct.
should be willing to name things after great communitarians of
With no money,
Torrington,
right.
whether they have money to give us or not.
I'm not
And
disagreeing
that's
with you.
Right, so I
that's
think
what
it's a
I'm
case by case.
saying. But the policy would have to make it clear at the rip, and this is why I'm straw polling it, The policy needs to make clear whether or not we'll take money to consider naming something after you or not. And that's why that's the straw poll.
That's why I say no.
Right, because I think that, because then the
That's
policy
my
would have
point.
to say, we won't take any money, but you can do this to begin the process of considering naming something after somebody.
And what
For
would this-
free.
What would this be? Well, let's say, let's
Well,
say,
that would be the policy committee's purview. What
Right.
we're doing right here is setting down
So
a
we are
general
considering
direction
it.
from the board.
in effect, we're considering, we're just not saying come in with $1 million.
Right.
Let us
Right,
consider.
so we would still name things after people, but we're telling them right at the outset, we don't want to take money for this. And that's my thought,
Right.
because
They
we
don't
aren't a,
necessarily have to pay
right,
for
we
it.
aren't a private university
Mhm.
where we take tons of money from our rich alumni. We are Torrington Public Schools, and there are lots of people who've done a lot for our community who don't have the money
Mhm.
to buy a naming right.
Doc McKenna was one of them, 66 years of
Mhm.
taking care of kids for free. Every
That
game
opens
and-
it also, it opens up to everyone,
Yeah.
Mhm.
not
And
just those in the community, like a big tobacco company, I want to name the
So on
library,
a
the
case by
Marlboro.
case basis, the Board of Education says absolutely not.
Well, and we
But they
can
can sue you because you accepted it from him because he did
we
it from
can
his
enshrine in
father.
policy that they
No.
always have to be
If it's
connected
money.
to
If
the
it's
school
money.
community.
Only if it's money.
Yeah,
Correct.
so we can
That's
say,
what
no, we
I'm
don't want
saying.
your money. We just say, no, we don't want your money, Marlboro.
You'd have to say.
No, there's a line in
No.
our
you'd have to
current
say no
policy
money
that
to
says,
anybody. You
our
say
current
nobody
policy
can buy
says
the
you
name.
can't
That's
do
what I'm saying.
Right.
You
Okay,
either-
Again,
Open it
that's
up.
why I say no.
So, right,
Right.
so
No.
the straw poll, and I'm gonna ask it, I'm asking them to raise their hands. The straw poll is, should people be able to give money to put their name on stuff? Or should we not accept money and still name stuff? Right, that's the binary that
B.
is put in front of you. And I understand there's lots of nuance around this issue, but the binary put immediately in front of you right now is that. So,
Name a building. name a
raise your
structure.
hand if you
What
would
if you-
ask the policy committee to consider taking money to name anything.
Absolutely.
I think so.
And I don't care that I'm in the
Yeah,
only one.
no,
that's
I,
fine.
no, I already,
No,
I already
that's
said
fine.
yes to
Yeah,
it.
Even if you
whereas,
were the only one, it's
raise your
okay,
hand,
Kristen.
Gary's taking notes for his committee.
I'm gonna say
If you
yes to
would
both.
not, if you don't consider that the board should take money to name things, raise your hand.
You
Can
can't
I
vote
answer
it
both?
You
twice.
can't vote
Yeah.
twice.
Well, yeah, that's the
Why?
problem. That's why it has to, it's a case, that's why.
Yeah, that's
we-
why it's a binary.
Right, a case by
I'll
case
say yes or
basis,
no.
it can
No,
go
I-
either,
I'll stick with
Okay, this discussion is no longer productive.
What if-
No, it's
what if
not.
You don't
I was
want
trying,
naming at
sorry,
all?
guys.
no, it's all right.
That's,
what?
that falls into category B.
So the,
Well, no, you'll name, but without any money. What if you want to allow no naming whatsoever?
Which
anyone-
would,
See, that wasn't an
which
option.
would
Well,
be, no, I think
because
that's
that
a
was a
perfect
binary
option, but
question, but
also,
I think it's important to bring up.
right, but name nothing at all, but give people the option to make a donation by buying, putting their name on a
Okay,
stone.
so let's
Or
move
brick.
quickly because we've
Go
beaten
ahead,
this to
yep, go
death.
ahead.
If you are with Ellen
Mhm.
and you don't
I'm
want,
just bringing it up.
no, it's
Yeah.
important. If you're with Ellen here and you don't want the Board of Education to give anyone naming rights to anything under any circumstances, raise your hand now.
I know, right
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
there too.
That's-
So I know I voted twice, but I'm,
I think a
I
lot
don't
of us
like
don't
they
have a
give
problem
taking
with a
money.
brick or something.
But I'm just,
right,
and when I say naming rights too, that would include for the policies committee's purposes, anybody requesting or suggesting to the board. It wouldn't preclude the board from considering it of its own accord.
Mhm.
So we could all decide in 40 years to name our next school the John Kisco Elementary School.
I vote for
Nice,
that.
John. I thought I was gonna throw the Mike Wilson
But
building
John's
sometime.
I
grandchildren
lost that
wouldn't
one.
be
That's
able to
60
ask
years.
us to
Oh,
do
thank
that.
you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
it's,
Jeff.
You're
We
not
could.
old enough yet.
Because a lot of our buildings
That would be the
are
same.
named after people already.
Right.
Correct. Vogel Wetmore named after two people.
Yeah.
And this building is named after the person after whom the road is named.
Yeah,
That is true. I
Yeah.
never thought of that.
I just
Whose factory is down the street?
yeah, no, I think that's true. We put a lot of different scenarios out there. I think we are all, I think after that, we all are kind of on the same page. We know there's a lot of different options out there. We don't want to give people the idea that you could just send us money, or well, I mean, some of us do that.
Yeah,
you-
I absolutely, yeah, I
that you
absolutely
can
do
send
believe
money
that we
and get
should
named.
accept money for our kids.
I mean, if there's any way for us to arrive at a policy that lets us look at it on a case by case basis. I
Well, it would
love
be, it
that.
would involve the convening of a committee.
Still
But you've only,
suggest,
your
The
straw
subcommittee.
poll only included naming rights. So that doesn't say you couldn't have a policy, to Kristen, my point
Right.
earlier,
So
that
it's a-
you can accept
Correct.
donations, and if we're going to recognize you, we're gonna recognize everybody the same way.
Right,
In a wall
right.
or a
It's a,
stone. but it's
it's a
not-
tiered thing,
yeah,
Jeff.
you
You
know,
can only
it's-
ask people for two options
Right.
when you put a binary question in front of them. So I don't disagree that we haven't covered that, but that wasn't the question. at hand.
Understood.
Um,
and I would suggest, go online, look at a lot of the other, starting with this.
I tried to pull as many,
and go- and
Without
just read that and
overpowering
find out
it,
how-
yeah.
How
So
some of
the
the schools
packet-
get through those issues.
yeah,
that
the
he's
policy
bringing up.
packet that you had.
Just to give some clarification, or some ideas,
Mhm.
because there are a lot out there.
right, and one thing I might pose to the group, I guess, because it does cost us a lot of money when we do stuff like this, but it may be worth it because there's a lot of potential exposure and a lot of questions about what is and isn't allowed. It may be worth it to invite the board's legal counsel to the next
agree.
policy committee meeting.
Yeah.
But again, this stuff costs us a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make that
Let's
decision
try
on my
not
own.
to, right.
But if everybody thinks that this is sort of touchy enough and has lots of questions about what is and isn't permissible, then we could certainly ask them to come. So I put that question to the group.
Okay, let me start the answers by saying, for what we pay our lawyers, I don't think it would be worth it to have them at one of these
Meetings, right. And they may have a sample policy other than this one that already, right? Do they have one in their library?
I'm not sure if Shipman has one. I mean, there are other Connecticut ones that have. I think the caution and the, you know, as I said, back from 2022, when I read it and talking to Sue and Kim, who were on the call with our attorneys at the time, it was just the caution of, you know, caution the district to not really get themselves trapped into it. But I also understand, obviously, we're going through a next phase of brand new building, you know, there's a lot, comes a lot with it. You know, in my own opinion, is that kind of, and I don't want to, because I understood the questions on the table, I don't want to redo it, but if you do a wall or a brick, then everyone is treated the same. I think when people want to donate and people have that community give back feeling, I think that's wonderful, and I do think we can benefit, and by we, I mean our students benefit from things of that nature. But I think from a recognition standpoint, I think that recognition has to be consistent, with the exceptions of, and you mentioned that, you know, maybe the John Kisco Elementary, but if someone somewhere comes out and, you know, with a real case and makes their case to the board, so, or for example, a friend of the board unfortunately is no longer with us, but really has given their whole life to the community and to the kids, and the board, you know, and the person comes, let's just say, to a board meeting and at in public session says, you know, I'd like for the board to consider, you know, my dear dad, and, you know, we miss him dearly, but I'd really like to consider the board to do something in his memory. Then I think, to everyone's point earlier, then I think it becomes a real committee decision and say, you know what, John Kisco was a friend to the kids and to the board.
And
What do we
that's-
do with it?
That's
You know?
where we, sorry, John.
You
But
were
that's-
just like-
And that's, I think, where we landed,
Gonna
because
go like that.
four of the 9 of us said they don't want to name it, you know, to take requests to name anything at all, which means the other 5 are fine with taking suggestions from the community. So where we
Yes.
landed, based on the straw polls with regard to naming buildings and things like that, is we don't want people to be able to essentially transact a name,
Mhm.
but we do want to be able in the policy to take consideration of somebody coming to the board and saying, I would like, you know, the board to consider this. So that's where we landed as a
fair.
group on naming things anyway.
And you are right about legal opinion, once we finally have
Right.
something more concrete.
Correct.
Yes,
Discussion.
I would
Yes.
agree with that.
Well, then I can say.
Hang on,
one thing
Gary.
about-
Kristen,
oh,
then
sorry,
Hannah.
sorry.
I just don't think it's a black and white issue. I really don't. And I think every
You're right.
request should be considered by a committee, whether it's the entire board or a committee of an odd number of people, say 5 or whatever.
Like one of our subcommittees
Yeah,
now.
So,
like our
yeah, I
policy.
just, and I don't know if there would be a policy written in a way that would allow that type of consideration to happen you know, case by case. I don't know if that's a legal way to handle it, but.
I think when you bring in accepting a financial contribution, that's where you need the policy to define a system. And that's why I asked folks where they were at on it, because the policy can absolutely set up a system for considering naming buildings by committee and case by case. But when you start bringing in the idea of accepting contributions, that's where it gets a little bit muddy.
It needs to be more rigid.
And that, right, and that's why the point of putting this on, having this on the agenda was to seek some broader board input for Gary's committee's use, right, for the policy committee's use. And that's why I asked a series of questions, and we could certainly start pull lots of other things. But again, where we landed was generally, we don't want to take money for naming stuff, but we will sort of take requests, right? And put that in your policy however you want.
But
But
no, well,
that's-
back to the attorney issue. We're gonna spend the money on the attorney no matter what. We're gonna go around,
It's cheaper if they don't have to come here.
well, Then they can
And
zoom in.
sit through one of these meetings.
I
Well, we
Right.
talk about the same
Beat
thing.
each
I
other.
understand, but if we continue to come up with something that we keep having them review, then they're just gonna turn it anyway. I mean, I think it's helpful to get their opinion, whether it's a Zoom or here.
Well, we have, their opinion is don't do it. We already have their opinion. That's what this email says. Don't accept
Right.
the donations to name buildings.
What would actually happen to that?
I don't think that's
Probably.
changed.
Well, what was their latest email they sent us? They said they have the right to do it. They didn't say.
No, we're the decision. This
The
was
decision
that,
is ours.
yeah, this was a recommendation from the attorney, do not name a building after someone, period.
But it's
The
our
legal
decision.
opinion that we received was who has the
Okay.
authority, the city or the Board of Ed, and it's the Board of Ed.
And
Under the
having,
charter, it's the Board of
and
Ed.
having down what we want, to John's point, would be the point probably to bring them in and have them write it on paper. And so we've settled, I think, as a group, again, barring Bill, right, who needs to be able to give his input on these informal things. If we were voting tonight, he'd be out of luck, but we're not.
Mhm.
So, certainly we have to solicit some info from him, but right that we know what we want to do, at least with the sort of broader, like, can people get rights to name things?
Mhm.
Where we haven't settled on is, and what's a more complex question, is do we want, how do we want to handle general donations, either of small amounts for a brick on a walkway or of a small item like a bench?
Really,
And
think
we're
we need
running up
to-
against the clock
Yeah, I
already.
think we need to establish a subcommittee, and it's gonna be going forward, even if we keep it in place for a year after the new building opens. This is just my suggestion, open for input, but establish a subcommittee, so the building committee has somewhat people to stream these requests through effective immediately. And then the
Building committee or the Board of Ed?
Board of Ed
Okay, I thought you said
establishes,
building
a-
committee,
no,
yes,
the
yes.
Board of Ed establishes a subcommittee, the building committee can go to
I mean, ad hoc.
filter these in ad hoc, yes.
Right, because the simplest thing is accepting, a tree or a bench, as long as there's space for it and it can be
Mhm.
placed safely, that's simple and easy. But if people want to
Well, it's
start,
already here.
right, if they want to start kicking in $100 to support the schools or whatever, we need to seek advice about whether we can partner with our alumni association or other 501c3, or if that's illegal, right? Because we don't want to be in the business of taking $100 to put a brick somewhere. But I'm not necessarily opposed if it's okay of picking a neutral, school-connected 501c3
It wouldn't have to be the
nonprofit.
city.
I don't know, and that's what
Well,
I'm saying.
I don't keep expecting that the city would get the money, but
Right.
I don't know if it's true.
Right, but
Might
if
be.
we can,
Yeah,
if we
it's the
can
city's
part,
money.
Yeah.
but, it kind of isn't sometimes.
Right. that's
If
why
somebody,
I'm
if the
attorney.
class of 1974, instead of getting a
Right.
bench, had said, we want to contribute $1,000 for general school benefit,
Mhm.
if it's legal for us to say, we'll engrave your name on a plaque in the lobby, or we'll put a brick on a walkway with your organization's name on it if you donate this much, and the donation has to go to, the alumni association, or, if there's a nonprofit that exists to support our, athletes who don't have any
Beautification.
money,
Yeah.
or something like that. And if that's legal, and it's worth asking our attorney, then that would be my preference. Because I don't want to be in the business of taking money and giving it to the city and fighting
Trying
that
to get
fight.
it,
That's
right,
what the attorney needs to answer.
Right.
I don't,
W-
yeah.
Once we have a policy, a draft, so once we have our thoughts in one place.
Right,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
we at least have answered the hard questions about naming stuff.
Right.
So maybe start there.
Yeah.
And we can at least reach out and figure out what the possibilities are.
Mhm. Yeah, we can
And
do
we
that.
can bump that over when we get it, so that the committee can start there and knows what is and isn't okay. You wanted to jump in, Scott.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
I think I took my glasses off.
Okay.
Um,
Can we
Alright.
wrap that up?
yeah, so health insurance update.
Oh, joy.
Um, this actually probably isn't as long of a discussion as you think, because where we're at, you all, I think you forwarded the memo that we sent to
Individually
everybody.
sent
Yeah, so
everybody.
everybody's
Yeah,
seen the
we did.
latest, the direction that based on your input and multiple votes and so on, the direction we've given to the superintendent, making sure that we pay the appropriate amount to the city, no more and no less. So that's where that is. And then we're still working on, of course we are, a suitable date, mutually suitable date with the Board of Finance and the administration to meet with the insurance consultant. And I'm certain that is going to continue to be a moving target. I don't think they're very
So
enthusiastic
next renewal. maybe?
about this
Yeah.
meeting. But you know, at a certain point, I'm just gonna drive to Joe Spurgeon's office. I still don't believe that he's a real person. I've never seen him.
I think they might have.
I know.
Yeah.
Ellen
exists.
says, right,
Michael and
Ellen
Scott.
and Michael and Scott say that he exists, but I don't believe it because he certainly never appeared before me.
I know.
I thought we had a date with him.
We did.
Thomas and the
It got
Bible.
postponed.
Oh, I
No,
thought
it was the next date was, I think we have,
May 8th, coming up soon, but
no, we had it, somebody, there was a conflict from,
Correct, not about the.
yeah, we have an
Just not
agreement
where
signed
we
on the
were.
15th.
Right,
Oh,
yeah.
that's what that is.
There was a brief attempt at securing a date from their end, so it will likely materialize.
Maybe after.
My hope is before the end of the
Oh, I had it
fiscal
on the
year.
On the 13th.
Correct, the May 13th, Jeff.
I have May 13th.
That was the
May
date
13th?
that didn't work. That was the night the date they threw out that evening. and
Yeah, they
that
proposed
didn't
that,
work.
but we didn't
Okay.
set that.
All right.
But you're correct,
So
Jeff.
it's the
That was the date
15th.
they
Sorry.
Sorry?
It's the
Remove that
15th.
from my calendar.
I don't know if they
Yeah.
landed on another. I know the 13th didn't work.
The 15th is a grievance.
Yeah, so that can't be that.
Yeah, so it won't be then.
but to your point, Ed, some of us can go out there, we'll meet him at his
Can't
office
do
if we
the
have to.
14th
I'm
because
happy
it's the
to.
June
I'll go.
national
Yeah.
I
holiday.
think
it-
at
we'll
this
make it
point,
easy
we
for
need to wait till June.
That's what I think,
There's
but no,
too much
we
going
of
on
course, we
today.
want him to appear before the
When
board,
renewal for insurance
in
is
not in
July.
an executive session
Or
either.
Correct.
fiscal year.
I would like him to, you know,
Changes out.
appear
Yeah,
before
does it.
the public as well, and our teachers, whomever are paying into this fund.
Question for Michael. When is the renewal for insurance? July 1?
That's when it takes effect, correct?
Okay.
We need to have the meeting in June.
Right, and there are some outstanding
It should have
issues.
been January.
You know, they did at least provide us with all the information related to how it's calculated, but I think there has to be
Yeah.
some accountability
Yeah, we need an MOU in
related to the
place and-
administrative fees. I have some pretty significant concerns with how much money the insurance fund is paying out for its administration and for its consultants.
Right, we want to see the real cost from Joe Spurgeon.
Right, and our employees and our budget's driving this fund. And ultimately, it may make more sense, for example, to hire a claims administrator whose salary is paid out of that fund, rather than pay over $1 million to an insurance company. And it's still a little unclear to me how much money overall goes to Mr. Spurgeon and his firm.
I think some of that goes to some of the employee programs, that administrative thing.
Right, so where some of the administrative costs are going out of this insurance fund is a little unclear.
And what they are.
Right, and what they are, how they're determined, how it's bid. I've been on this board for 7 years and I've never participated in a bid process for the
It's gone out
contract
to bid.
that was awarded to Mr. Spurgeon. And if the
Yeah.
city is awarding no bid contracts to a guy who's overseeing over $1 million in administrative costs from the insurance, that's concerning to me,
Mhm.
right? They should be bid. We bid out jobs over 10 grand.
We've talked about it every year, never gets there.
Right, so, well, we're gonna get there. That's our
It's much
determination.
closer. We're
Yeah,
closer.
probably have some backbone.
Right, this is a big problem. So Sue and I are sort of fighting the good fight still on this. We haven't just had a meeting with the city and let it go. We're not letting it go. You all haven't let it go in the budget that we passed either, where we made important determinations about how much money to estimate. But that's the general update. If anyone has anything to add or any questions. Okay. I will hear a motion to go into executive session to review and discuss the superintendent's contract. And did we want
Just the board.
just the board on that? That's what I thought.
So moved.
All those
Do you know
in
how to vote?
favor, say aye.
Gary and Jeff,
We'll wait to vote.
yes, I do.
Yeah. Okay.
7:15.
Any opposed?